I am just thrilled. And before I jump into these remarks I've put together, I want to congratulate members of Randolph's Cum Laude Society. Having spent a few years in school, I look back on these groups and really truly believe you represent what's best about this school and this community. And through your hard work and through your service, you are making this city and you will go on to make this country a better place. So let's give them all a round of applause one more time. And I said a little bit earlier at the beginning, it seems like there's a little bit of a gender bias here. So fellas, next year, pick it up a little bit. All right, bear down. All right, now bear with me. I haven't had to turn in anything to Randolph in 17 years, and I wasn't that good at it back then. It's quite intimidating to stand here and offer my words of wisdom to all of you students, because when I look out at this crowd, I can draw a continuous line back through my years at the White House, the presidential campaign in Chicago, the consulting job in DC, the gig I had managing commercial real estate in Vermont, the AmeriCorps job that changed my life, the summer in Huntsville shucking oysters at a bar downtown, a few tech jobs in California, 4 years at Duke, and all the way back to that chair you're sitting in. Well, actually, a chair just down the road, but you know what I mean. All right, and I know how you're feeling right now. At the end of a long ceremony, well, not so long, but at the end of the school day. So I'm going to try to be short and sweet with what I have to say. I had a lot of hope when I was in that chair, but I also had a little fear. As excited as I was about setting out on my own one day, heading to college and so forth, I still wondered how the grown-up world actually worked. So if there are any of you out there who feel that way, let me tell you, 17 years later, I am still filled with that wonder. There's no secret code to being an adult, and you certainly don't learn it at college. It turns out that as you grow older, you pick up a lot of new ideas and friends, maybe a few pounds, but you never really figure it out. It's not anyone's fault, really. How could anyone be expected to master a world that is changing as profoundly as the one we live in right now? I feel incredibly lucky to have a unique appreciation for this change that comes from beginning high school with card catalogs and finishing it with search engines. That's what happened when I was in high school. When I was in lower school, we used paper punch cards left over from the first computers to scratch paper. By middle school, I learned to use a dial-up modem to connect to the computer lab. And when I say computer lab, I mean the single place on campus where we kept all the computers. Now the phone in your pocket would run circles around any of those old machines. There's a 9-year-old from Tennessee named Robbie Novak, who many of you may know as Kid President. People know Kid President out there? Raise your hand, hopefully. Okay, good. That was close. For the rest of you, he's this adorable guy who puts out his own presidential addresses that are as inspirational and positive as they are popular. One of his pep talks has over 17 million views. I was with him yesterday when he met the real president. After a brief presidential summit, President Obama gave Robbie a tour of the Oval Office. He stopped at a shelf and said, "Now this is pretty cool. It's an original telegraph." Robbie replied, "What's a telegraph?" So look, technology is getting more powerful, and that part's pretty straightforward. The real change, what makes your generation really special, is how you're using it. You need to collaborate on a group project? Just spin up a Google Doc. Work together. Want to join a conversation about any subject with people across the world instantly? You just find the right hashtag on Twitter. Have something important you want to share with the world? Just cut together a video and publish it. Who knows? Next thing, you may be in the Oval Office. Now, these examples may seem obvious to you, but that's my point. These new models of learning, collaboration, and networking, they aren't obvious to everyone else. Many of my Randolph classmates and most of my White House colleagues wouldn't instinctively think of those things. I know that may seem crazy, but it's true. Now here's what's really fun to think about. In 17 years, imagine what one of you will be saying to the kids sitting where you are right now. What new models of collaboration and discovery will exist? What tools will the next generation take for granted that you'll struggle to figure out? So here's my advice. While you are on the vanguard of the technological and cultural change, touching everything from governments to news media, from the entertainment industry to issue advocacy, from health and wellness to how we stay in touch with our loved ones, press your advantage. Starting right now, through college and into your 20s, know that your generation can punch above its weight. The rest of us, we're just trying to keep up with the things you do naturally. Press your advantage by asking bold questions, by testing your ideas about how the world could work differently. Because you'll find that you're right more often than you expect, but not always. The first big risk I ever took was a gigantic flop. When I graduated from college, I moved out to California to start a company with a Randolph classmate. We had this brilliant idea that we would make CD-ROMs shaped like business cards. We thought that was like a really sweet idea. I even wrote a business plan, and the thing failed. And there we were, stuck in California. What a terrible idea. But you know what? It got me to California. It got me away from everyone and everything familiar. It put me squarely in part of the country that was bubbling with passion for technology and media. And I learned more about those industries than I ever did in the classroom. The best things that ever happened to me came from taking risks. Calculated risks, to be sure, but bets I fundamentally made on my gut and nothing else. Earlier, I spoke about a job that changed my life. Taking that risk is the reason I work at the White House, and it's the reason I'm standing in front of you right now. In 2002, I was living back in Huntsville. After 4 years of college, 2 years in California, I didn't feel like I had much more of a plan than I did when I was your age. Browsing the internet one night, I came across a job that looked interesting. It was a small nonprofit in Vermont, connected college student mentors with children in low-income housing communities. I'm not sure why, but I had a hunch this was something I needed to do. Maybe it was because I'd always wanted to live where it snows. Maybe it was because my dad was getting really eager for me to go to law school. Dad, you remember that? But a week later, I packed up my pickup truck and drove north. So here I was in Vermont. It's cold, and I didn't know anyone. I'm not going to lie. I was at the beginning not quite sure I'd made the right decision. But slowly I started to realize that everything was changing for me. You see, while I had spent years struggling to learn what to do, I had never stepped back to ask why I was doing it in the first place. Sure, there were grades to keep up and rent checks to mail in, but I didn't really have a theory about what all this effort boiled down to. But for me, working with those mentors and kids made it click. I realized the world these families faced was very different, and much more difficult than the life I had come to take for granted. I was lucky to be born to such wonderful parents who paid attention to me every day of my childhood, who helped me with my homework, taught me to be courteous to others. I was lucky to walk into Miss O'Reilly's kindergarten classroom 30 years ago. That's wild, 30 years ago. And to spend 13 years in a place where everyone knew my name, and I got to know a bunch of other lucky kids. The Randolph experience you and I have in common is exceptional. Exceptional. And by definition, that means most other schools, most other students, they don't know anything like it. Addressing his alma mater at Princeton, the author Michael Lewis, who wrote a book you may know called Moneyball, summed up the way I felt in Vermont very simply. Recognize that if you've had success, you will have also had luck. And with luck comes obligation. You owe a debt, and not just to your gods. You owe a debt to the unlucky. So I decided to apply everything I learned, every skill I had, to help solve it. And thanks to what I learned those years in California, I knew a few things about websites, knew a few things about digital media, came in really handy. And working on solving that problem with that sort of approach has led me to where I am today. Now, I'm not suggesting we should all go jump in my truck and drive to Vermont. Not even close. My story is just that. It's mine. Your passion may be for building bridges, or designing websites, or trading stocks on Wall Street, or trading lines up on a stage like this. But here's an important lesson from my experience that I hope you'll take away. Shake it up. On one hand, challenging your assumptions may reveal that your original path was right all along. But on the other hand, you may unlock some amazing new passion you never knew existed. But whatever you do, take advantage of the wonderful foundation your Randolph education offers and the incredible technologies at your fingertips to seek out new ideas. Get out of your comfort zone and discover what you've taken for granted and what new passions reside within you. Do it because you owe a debt to your teachers, to your parents, to this community for all they've given you. Do it because you owe a debt to the unlucky, those who might not be able to take the risks or appreciate the opportunities that you can. But most of all, do it for yourself. And you know what? Have fun while you're doing it. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you. And congratulations again to the members of the Cum Laude Society. Thank you.